before they give their address. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Confirm you are hearing me, Sharon?
I confirm, I can hear you.
Oh, fair enough. Thank you. Good afternoon once again. Now, I just wanted to make a few remarks before the training team comes in. I know we had a conversation last week concerning the expectations for the meeting, and I think you have captured it well in your opening remarks. Ours is just to say we appreciate this opportunity to be part and parcel of this engagement as members of KRA in the Southern region, where you got people call the the former coast province, right, from Lamu all the way to Kwale and Taita Taveta. We call it under KRA term Southern region. We are honored that we have been accorded an opportunity by members of the LSK to be able to engage, to be able to walk through this journey of teams and e-teams. Ours is just to confirm that we are here and we are available, that this should not be a one-off affair. Our offices are open even after the sensitization. We believe that we can now have a proper engagement with your members, because where KRA is moving from is that we are moving from being an authority to being a service-driven department where we are adopting relationship management. Every taxpayer within our database is supposed to be allocated to an account manager. So even for your members, I think I just want to point out that it is important that even as they carry out their businesses, they need to know who their account manager in KRA is, so that whenever they have issues, they know who to talk to and which office to visit. I think this opportunity for teams and e-teams and any other issue that may come up in the course of this sensitization is a great opportunity for us to learn from each other, be able to understand, be able to present where we are as KRA and where we want to go in as far as embracing technology to try and improve the aspect of compliance for our stakeholders. We want to make it compliance as cheap and as easy as possible, so that we let you concentrate on your business of running your law firms. Secondly, I think the other aspect of this sensitization is that we want to empower you with knowledge, because I think being part of the legal fraternity, whenever you go to court, I think they say ignorance is no defense. So we do not want to say that you did not know. It is important that you know these things, so that you take the necessary steps to ensure that you are in compliance with the tax laws of the land. And thirdly is that we also want to pick up your concerns. What are the issues that you have, not only in relation to teams and e-teams, which you are talking about today, but any other issue that is affecting you in as far as compliance with tax laws is concerned. So on behalf of my regional coordinator, Mr. Lawrence Yellow, is out on official duty in Taveta, and also on behalf of the domestic tax coordinator, Mr. Ido, who is on leave, I just want to welcome all of you to this forum, and let us engage, let us share ideas. I will be stepping out briefly because I have another meeting that I need to attend to, but I know the team that is going to be with you is able and is great under the leadership of our chief manager in charge of teams and e-teams, Madam Akamba. She will be able to take you through, and even Felix will be able to pick up question and answer, because Madam Akamba is based in Nairobi, while Felix is based here in Mombasa at Long Room. So please feel free. At the end of the day, I'm sure you'll be able to share his contacts so they're able to move forward together. Otherwise, karibuni sana, and let us learn from each other. Thank you.
Yes, so I believe our first speaker is going to be Mr. Felix Samani. Mr. Felix Samani is a tax administrator. He has 5 years in experience with Kenya Revenue Authority. He's the champion for the e-teams and the DTD, Compliance Management Officer for Southern Region. I believe Southern Region is part of the coast. Maybe he'll also explain to us what DTD stands for. Thank you. Mr. Felix, welcome.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the welcome. Now, Etims as an opener, Etims is just a platform for generating invoices, capturing your transactions, the services you offer to various individuals, corporations. You'll be capturing them, then later you file them in iTax. Without much ado, I welcome our boss, Madam Makamba Wangwe, to lead us in the presentation. Then we will carry on with the question and other sessions and other matters that may arise as we proceed. Thank you. Welcome, our CM.
Thank you, Felix. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Mombasa Law Society for this opportunity that you've given us to highlight on Etims. Also, the Mombasa office for giving us the privilege of taking us through this presentation. And as what I'd be requesting, perhaps maybe if you can project the presentation from your end, I think I would appreciate that better so that I focus on one thing. Thank you. With me, I'm joined by one of my colleagues. We like joining meetings more than one person in case technology fails me, then the presentation should not fail, ideally. So on this call with the rollout lead, Madam Caroline Washuka, perhaps you can greet the team before we can continue as we have the presentation up. Thank you.
Thank you, Hakamba, and good afternoon, everyone. Let me see if I can share my video. Good afternoon, Mombasa Law Society. It's a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon and hoping to have an engaging session with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. I don't know, is it Felix, if you're projecting?
Yes, I'm sharing the presentation shortly.
Okay.
Sharing.
Akamba, maybe as Felix is trying to share, maybe you can just give maybe an update, a brief, just walk through as we wait for the sharing of this on the screen.
Or I can assist. I think I have a copy with me. I can assist.
That's okay.
That's in order.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I'll also try to, I'm going to have the video off.
On my end, I cannot share. Host disabled participant screen sharing.
That's okay, I think, Felix, thank you. Sharon has assisted us to that.
Okay.
So if you can put it on presentation mode. I think it's down, where your arrow is going, down towards the right. Okay.
Sorry,
Down.
you'll just have to help me with this.
Okay,
Okay.
so just go down. I can see your arrow, but just go down. Just go down, down, completely to the bottom.
Oh, to the bottom.
And then go towards the right. At the bottom, towards the right.
Oh, okay. Yes.
See,
This
okay,
one.
you've seen it. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, that one. Thank you.
Thank you.
So you can go to the next slide. Basically, what we're going to start with today for this forum is, you can go to the next slide, is basically just trying to see what the legal basis for electronic tax invoicing in Kenya is. And why we are talking about electronic tax invoicing basically is because we have been doing maintaining records, sales and purchase records for purposes of determination of a tax liability. But then increasingly globally, we've been hearing about electronic tax invoicing. So today we are going to establish what that is, and then now we focus on the Kenyan approach to this implementation. So we start with the legal basis. Sorry, is there someone speaking to me? Okay. If we can kindly, as you join, please have your audio off, so that we can be able to focus on the presentation. So we have, first of all, we have the Tax Procedures Act provisions under Section 23A. Now, the introduction of this was for the purposes, or is for the purposes of implementing the electronic tax invoicing for taxpayers who are not VAT registered. So why we are saying this is that for those who are VAT registered taxpayers, such as yourselves or more, who are on this call, then you know that we've been having these initiatives when we talked about the implementation of ETR, and then we moved to the implementation of Teams. And now we have the legal basis really domiciled under the Tax Procedures Act, meaning it's really opening it up. What it is opening it up to who? To the persons with business. Don't move fast. To the persons with business income. And then we have said that when you're talking about business income, we are talking about residents and non-resident persons with permanent establishment. So that's the target of this implementation. And what they're supposed to do to ensure that they pass all their business transactions through a system that is provided by the commissioner. So that's what we are calling the electronic tax invoicing, and also maintain a record of stock or stock management through the same system. In the course of the last week, we had the supporting law, the regulations out, and that is that the tax procedures, electronic tax invoice regulations 2024. That is, I'd like to encourage you to have a copy of that so that you can be able to go through the details, but we'll touch on some of the highlights in today's presentation. Basically, just highlighting on the provisions of Section 23A and more to allow the users, or what we call the persons with business income, comply to these requirements. So if when you go to the next slide, you'll be able to see, you can go to the next slide. You'll be able to see why we are doing this, and we have mentioned that this has been done before. It's rather a process that other countries have been doing, trying to automate the process of maintenance of records of sales and purchases for purposes of tax. And so to align to best practice, for example, for East Africa, I think if you're looking at the news, the highlight right now is Kenya and Uganda, who are in the process of rolling out this solution. But Tanzania and Rwanda have already rolled out the solution, and they are in operation phase to both VAT and non-VAT registered taxpayers. Really, the purpose of this is to enhance transparency and efficiency by use of technology, because we know that even as taxpayers are maintaining records of their sales and purchases for purposes of their own business transactions, when it comes to the now declaration of tax liabilities, then it becomes a bit cumbersome when you have to, first of all, we have moved to an online regime when it comes to return filing. But then when it comes to now verification of records, we are still in a manual regime. So we were trying to correct that to make sure that we match our verification process with our filing processes so that we make it more seamless, enhance compliance, and increase tax revenue. So we can go to the next slide now, just having given a background of what overall we are doing. Then we're going to talk about the Kenyan version of the implementation of the electronic tax invoice. And this is being brought largely by what we are calling Etims. When you go to the next slide, you'll be able to see what Etims is. Basically, it's a software that we are using for transmission of tax invoices to the revenue authority. Basically, that's what it does. So we applied this software when we were rolling out the Teams devices, where there's a software that was embedded. So contrary to what we had for the ETR regime, where you are only required to generate tax invoices through the ETRs, now for Teams, what we did is make these ETRs online or smart ETRs that not only generates invoices but transmits these invoices. So the support system within these devices is a software that allows for this to happen. But over time, what was realized is that as much as we were able to achieve much with the Teams regime, we had a section of our taxpayers who are not able to use the team's ETR devices because of cost constraints. It was felt like it was expensive for some. So what we did is that we developed the software internally, and what we have said that this software is available. It's available to taxpayers if they have an electronic communication device, be it a laptop, be it a computer, a mobile phone, tablet. Then they can install this software, which is a KRA software at no cost on their devices for purposes of their compliance. When we go to the next slide, we can see how this has helped us out in that it is a free software. So what we're able to accomplish on this one is that for VAT registered taxpayers, we're able to onboard the rest of the active taxpayers, so that we have some on Teams and then we have some on Etims, given that now we are also providing the flexibility. The taxpayer has a choice. We are not limiting them to purchase of an electronic tax register, but we have opened it up so that in whichever form they are comfortable, and we'll be able to see that more of that later, then they're able to comply. We are able to achieve the compliance, and even for taxpayers, they are not constrained into options within which they can comply. And remember the legal basis for implementation of this solution. The second one was stock management. Then, for taxpayers, especially who do not have or did not have any other form of invoicing system, then they have an opportunity also to have a complete system that will not only allows them to be able to generate invoices, but also they're able to maintain their stock records within this solution and run their business using the solution that has actually been offered by the Revenue Authority. Now, we've had insights about the simplification of tax return filing based on the February VAT return, where we made an attempt of having simplified it so that you have access to your transaction information based on the information that was transmitted to KRA, and what you are supposed to do is confirm and validate this information and make your tax payments. I'm sure I'm going to hear some of the challenges that you encountered during that process, but basically, this is a foresight of what we expect when once we complete the rollout for income tax or corporation tax purposes, then you should expect a similar approach to be used for other forms of returns, including the one that we have just started, the VAT return. Come to the next slide.
Hello? Hello? What was?
So basically, we need to think about the benefits,
Again.
because sometimes, sorry, there's a bit of interruption. So when we think about the benefits of Etims, we have talked much about what it's going to mean for the Revenue Authority, the attaining of efficiency, building compliance, adopting, attaining best practice, and of course, increase in revenue. But what does it mean to the taxpayer themselves? First of all, especially for taxpayers who do not have any other form of technology, then we give them an opportunity to adopt technology for their business transactions. But then in the process of adopting technology, we have found that some have had to streamline business administrative processes, identified gaps in their own business administrative processes, and sealed these gaps using this technology so that they can be able to better comply with the requirements of the law, but at the same time, they do better when it comes to conducting their own business. They themselves have visibility. This visibility of business transactions is not about the Revenue Authority. It's about the taxpayer themselves. Now, in the past filing season, the experience that we had with some of our taxpayers when it came to their sales details that we had with us, that when we displayed them to the taxpayer that this is what you transmitted, therefore when you're filing your return, don't forget to declare them. And then we had some taxpayers coming forward and telling us, but I don't recognize some of these sales. I only have one client, and we invoice them a fixed amount every month. So I don't know where these other invoices came from. So as much as we did our analysis and realized that they did get those transactions, we did get those transaction details from their own systems based on the serial numbers of the devices that were transmitting. A taxpayer going back to his premises and doing a further analysis on their own comes to find out that it is not a matter of those invoices not being his, but a matter of someone in his own business premises actually generating additional invoices that have nothing to do with that person's business. So of course they had something to sort out there. Remember what when you talked about streamlining business administrative processes, just looking inward and seeing where there are gaps, where perhaps they themselves may have been losing their own revenue or their own sales due to interference within their own business. So the visibility of business transactions is not only for KRA purposes, that's what I was trying to explain. It also applies to the taxpayer. And then we need to all on board, because when we all on board, remember the requirements of the law, as much as we talked about Section 23A, there's also an amendment of Section 16 of the Income Tax Act, where you are being told that even as you conduct your business and have complied with the requirements for electronic tax invoicing and also maintenance of stock records, but you are also being told that for any purchases or expenditure that you incur in the course of business, you need to make sure that you support this with an electronic tax invoice. So that takes it to the level where anytime you're making a purchase, you make sure that you request for an electronic tax invoice that has captured your PIN, so that by the time you're filing your return, and be it VAT, now we are focusing on VAT, but at a later date we'll be focusing on income tax, then you'll have the records that are supporting the expenditures that you are bringing in that are actually reducing your tax liability. And if we all comply so that we minimize the electronic tax invoice disputes, we also improve customer and supplier relationships. Most important, when we do all this, part of the processes that will be simplified is the processing of refunds. And we know much has been done in this regard to simplify the way refunds are processed. But here we are talking about the verification process, that if we have all the invoices that are due for verification for purposes of someone being paid their refunds, then if all these are transmitted, then it makes the process also much simpler, and it shortens the time that this verification is done, so that now it also shortens the time within which a refund is also paid. We can go to the next slide. And I think there's guidance in the chat that if you have questions, you can start bringing them on chat so that we can have them by the time we complete this presentation that is due to be completed shortly. Who should onboard? I think that question has come up so many times. I think a lot of emotions have been raised about who really should onboard. And remember, I'll still take you back to Section 23A. It says persons with business income, whether you are resident or non-resident with permanent establishment. So really, you have business income, so all persons or entities in business, and it's not limited to those who are registered for VAT, then you are required to onboard. And for purposes of Section 16, then it means then you need to support their own accounting for their own expenditure by making sure that you're also onboarded and issuing electronic invoices to this. Next slide. So now we've talked about who should comply. Now we talk about the solutions that are available. And we mentioned that we started with Teams and then we moved to Etims. So the solutions that taxpayers have been able to adopt on Etims, we have client, we have the online portal, we have the system-to-system integration. I'll be able to highlight more on this. And then lately, because of the feedback that we've received from our taxpayers regarding the simplicity or someone used the word fluency in their use of technology, then we stepped down to deliver what we are calling the Etims simplified solutions that are being used by taxpayers who have limitations. They don't have a lot of transactions, but they have limitations when it comes to the use of technology. So in the next slide, I'll be able to explain what these solutions are. We can go to the next slide. We have the client solution. I can just start even as we move there. So, oh, sorry, the simplified solution. We are calling them Etims Lite, and these are being used by individuals, but then it's also as we speak, because what we have adopted is what we call continuous improvement. So when we began, the simplified solutions were being used by individuals that are not registered for VAT, but are doing business income. So basically, sole proprietors with minimum transactions. But then over time, for example, the solution that is on the eCitizen and can be accessed from ecitizen.kra.go.ke, it's the web version of it. And once you have the eCitizen credentials, then you can access using this link, now is available also to non-individuals. The thing with it is that when you're accessing these solutions, if you're a director in any of the companies, the small taxpayers, remember, with minimum transactions, then you enter your ID number as you are signing up or as you are logging in. The system is able to show you the details of other companies that you are registered for, and this can be non-individual entities which you are aligned to, or your own sole proprietorships that you have registered. For purposes of raising invoices, then you can be able to select any of them and be able to raise the invoices. We have the USSD solution. Again, you can access it. I'll be able to show you the steps. Star 222#. Then you'll be able to get in there and be able to generate a tax invoice. Then we can go to the next slide. You can be able to see the solutions on Etims themselves. We start with the client solution. Again, we said that there's a software, a downloadable software that we have designed that can be able to facilitate the transmission of details of goods and services, and they are on Windows and Android devices. So if you have a phone, if you have a laptop, if you have a desktop, tablet, PDA, then you can be able to use this. Some work is underway for catering for iOS for those who are not on Android devices, but still, you still have options, especially when it comes to the variety of devices within which you can use this solution. When you go to the online portal on the next slide, I think this is where most of the law firms, the legal fraternity is actually. So the online portal is for those people who are exclusively rendering services. A good example is yourself. So you don't have any goods you've supplied. You don't need to install the software that we are calling a free software on your devices. All you need is to sign up on Etims, and then once you sign up and we approve your request, then you can be able to get credentials. You get the credentials that you log in and generate invoices whenever a transaction happens. So you log into a KRA system to generate your invoices. Then the next one is the system to system integration. This is an advanced option for those who are technologically advanced when it comes to technology, and they have billing systems. So if you have an ERP system, if you have QuickBooks and so forth, then what you're trying to do is you're already generating invoices from your system. What you are saying is that you'd like to link your system with the KRA system through an integration process, so that anytime you generate an invoice, then KRA can have access to this invoice. So the system to system integration is being done in two ways. If you have technical capacity and you are able to do the system to system integration yourself, then you are free to do it. What we do, we share specifications with you. We give you a test environment that when you are doing the specifications, you also are able to check that you are on the right path until you complete. We do a verification, we approve you, and you use your own software. But then there are some who are constrained when it comes to technology and it is understood. Then you have the possibility of using a third-party integrator. We have the list of the approved third-party integrators published on the KRA website. If you take just the way we've written approved third-party integrator, you'll be able to get the whole list. There are about 16. So there are 16 of those right now, and we're in the process of approving more so that we can have as many as possible to start support you to onboard into this process. So we can go to the next slide. So I talked about signing up on Etims. I said I was going to mention a bit of the process, and For Mombasa, we had Felix. He did not introduce himself well. He's actually leading the support for this process at the coastal region. So he's our go-to person for Mombasa, and he's done a fantastic job in this regard. But what you need to do on your end, first of all, you need to sign up. Like any app, you need to sign up. So you'd have to go to etims.kra.go.ke. You get credentials. Then once you are in the system again, you do what we call a service request. And for a law firm, when you're doing a service request, you're only requesting for the online portal. You don't have much to do with, unless you have another business that is transacting in goods, then in that case, you'd need a
Okay.
client. So remember, we said that the online portal is good for people who are only transacting in services. Then you'll be required to upload documents in the process of a service request. One copy of ID for a director, and what we call a commitment form to actually really confirm that it is you who is making this request. You click send, we approve on our end. If it's a client solution, you need to do the software configuration. But for in this case, for online portal, you only need the credentials, then you can log in, generate invoices, and transmit the same. At that point, you have complied. Can go to the next slide. When it comes to the simplified solutions, those ones are really small wordings. I struggle with them. My eyes are not good. So anyway, what you need to do, especially for the Etims Lite, that is the web solution, what you need to do is that you go to the eCitizen portal. Remember, we said ecitizen.kra.go.ke. If you have an eCitizen account, you have no problem because you're going to use the same credentials that you use to log into eCitizen. But if you don't have, you need to sign in so that you get the credentials. It will give you a one-time password, which will be verified. It's very seamless by the end this process. Then in that case, then you are able to be redirected to the KRA eCitizen, access the Etims invoicing solution button. Remember, at some point I said that once you log in, it will be showing you the companies that you're affiliated to. So when you're getting into this process, you actually need to get into this process having selected which company that you'd like to raise invoices for. You'll be able to confirm or agree to the terms and conditions. That's a given. And then once you activate the e-invoicing button, then you're able to generally just generate simple invoices. Right now, we have about over 70,000, I think, taxpayers using this solution. So that means that it's a solution that is widely sought after. I think as at yesterday, it was at 75,000 taxpayers using these solutions. The next slide. The next one is the USSD. Sorry, this solution pamoja na hiyo ya eCitizen on the eCitizen platform, the two of them are the ones that are accounting for over 70,000 and fast growing. Remember, it's accounting for 70,000, but we started rolling out this solution towards the end of February. So for a growth of 1 month, it's a huge growth. So it's widely being used by the smaller taxpayers. They need to, for the USSD solution, it's *222#. And then earlier had shown you that you select option 5, then you choose Etims invoice, then you're going to be required to enter your ID number. And it is at this point that we make a determination, ID number, and then you enter your year of birth, ID number, and year of birth. The thing with it is that here we make a determination whether or not you have a PIN. If you don't have a PIN, then most of the time what happens is that it will redirect you so that you're able to register for PIN before you can come back and be able to generate invoices. Again, for this option, let me just make a disclaimer. One, it's using your credit. So for any USSD transaction, it's a shilling per transaction. A transaction lasts for only 90 seconds. USSD is normally limited, so the person needs to move a bit fast. It's normally, the steps are sufficient, by the way, for that amount of time. It never should really time out unless there are delays along the way. But then you need to be on prepaid. You need to make sure that your PIN, if you have a PIN, that it has been migrated to iTax. Remember, when you are migrating to iTax, for those of us who are here in 2015, we needed as taxpayers to like register on iTax. We were calling it an iPage update. So we find most of the taxpayers who are coming to use this solution have not migrated the iPage, and rightfully so, because they have been dormant taxpayers, but now we recognize that they are doing business. So if you find they're having trouble, make sure that you check that they have migrated their details onto iTax and that their PIN is active again. Over time, there are some whose PINs were cancelled. So anytime they enter their PIN, it actually says there's no information or something to that effect. So what they need to do is to make sure that their PIN is active before they can use this solution, and make sure that they have PIN in the first place. Sometimes we are required to do what we call a data migration, especially if there's an information update that has been done, be it on the director details, for example, or your own details on iTax. Then in that case, we would need to do a data migration before you can actually proceed and generate invoices. So you can go to the next slide. So with that, I've given you highlights on what the solutions are. I've given you highlights on why we have these solutions. So touching a bit on the regulations, that the main law said that we need to conduct electronic tax invoices and then maintain a record of stock through the system. But we know that there are some who are not maintaining a record of stock through the system. Then we'll be asking ourselves, is it even legal? Yes, it is. So the law has provided for a person who is providing services as yourselves, then you don't need to maintain a record of stock in the system. A person who is using a simplified solution, so the solutions that I've shown you, then you don't have to maintain a record of stock through those solutions, because again, it's for smaller taxpayers with minimum transactions. So the minute you grow and you need to use the Etims solutions, for example, on client, then if you're supplying goods, then you'd need to maintain a record of stock. But as long as you're on the simplified solutions, you don't need to maintain a record of stock. That said, this is not to say that if you are transacting in goods, then we all move to the simplified solutions because there's no stock management. If you have many transactions, you'll find you'll have limitations with the simplified solutions, and it might be inconveniencing for you. So we are going to ask you to move to the Etims client solutions so that you have a better experience and better support your system more efficiently. Lastly, any person using a system prescribed by the commissioner. A good example of this is the Teams system, because we have taxpayers who are using the Teams solution, over 76,000 taxpayers who are using that solution. So it's best that we support them on that solution for the time being. If we have any other system and we are going to talk about it in the next slide, that we are getting transaction information from, then you'll find that for the interim, again, we may not have the stock management module until at a time when such systems are mature enough to support the stock management module. So those are the persons who do not need to maintain records of stock if you're using any of those three systems. Next slide. The next slide is going to be very, very important for this discussion, because at the end of it, even as we discuss the rollout of Etims, people are normally asking, so how can I be exempted? Or how can my suppliers be exempted? So here's the thing. The main law, sections 23A, had already made provisions for exemption for emoluments subject to pay as you earn, importation of goods and services, airline passenger ticketing, investment allowances, interest income, yes, for those ones. And then it said, and similar payments. So the regulations has gone and updated and given more details on what similar payments mean. So for example, in the case of investment allowances, it says including internal accounting adjustments. And this would be like, for example, adjustments for bad debt, for example, adjustments for foreign gains or losses, wear and tear. So those don't have to be passed with an electronic tax invoice. We have also the inclusion of fees charged by financial institutions. So what has come into our attention is that if you go to the bank and make a deposit or a withdrawal, as long as it's a financial institution and their charges maybe, let's say, the 200 shillings for deposit or withdrawal, then those do not have to be supported with an electronic tax invoice. And then services provided by non-residents without permanent establishment. Remember, we talked about importation of goods and services in section 23A, but then for importation, some of you have been asking us, what if I travel abroad and I incur some expenses in the process of my travel? Let's say if I incur expenses in accommodation, for example, and any charges that you are charged out there, or if my servers are out there, then those people are not on Etims, and we recognize that. So whichever invoices you get from out there that are in the course have been attained or expenses incurred in the course of your business, then they can be brought into the income tax return because they are admissible and they are exempt. It's part of our exemptions. And then finally, a new addition is expenses subject to withholding tax as a final tax. So for this, especially for those who have SACCO savings, and at some point you get your dividend at the earlier part of the month around this, the year, around this time, then you know there's some withholding tax that is charged. So you might be asking, then was I supposed to give my SACCO an electronic tax invoice? We are saying no, that expense or that income was subject to withholding tax, and therefore it's exempt for purposes of Etims. But then, with these provisions of exemption, then as for some of us are still asking, what if I'd really like to apply for exemption? Then, because expressly we've been given the basis, the transactions that are subject to exemption, but you're asking still, I would like to be exempted, or I'd like the people downstream from me to be exempted. Then, what do I need to do? What the law says also is that if transaction information is received through a platform recommended by the commissioner, or if the information is transmitted to the authority's system, what we are saying is that when you apply for exemption, then you're just not applying for exemption for, let's say, the people who are on your downstream. What you are telling us is, how else do we get visibility of these transactions? Because remember, we are trying to attain visibility of taxable transactions at the lowest level. So we are trying to achieve it through electronic tax invoices and in this case, Etims. But then you're telling us you'd like some quota to be exempted. So you need to tell us also the alternate method within which you'd be doing the recording, storing, and transmission of the transaction data to KRA. Of recent, to support this, you could hear us as KRA talking about one, the buy initiated invoice, and two, we've been talking about the reverse invoicing solution. So I'm going to explain the reverse invoicing solution for purposes of members who it can be a possibility for you, but you can use it also to assist other business entities if it is a consideration. So the reverse invoicing solution is one which we are leveraging on an existing trusted system that a taxpayer is already making payments or is transacting payments through. Now, a good example that we have had an engagement for is the coffee sector. They have a direct settlement system, so that through the coffee auction, at the point where payments are being made, they are all being made through one platform where all the players are actually involved, and they get their payments through that one platform once a coffee sale is done through the auction. Now, what we have asked, for example, that's a good example we are giving because it's a live example that is ongoing. So what we've done is that we've identified the players who have been covered by this system, so that now these players, once their payments are done, we make sure that these players have PIN, because we need to identify the entities that are playing on that ecosystem. So all of them have to have PIN, so that anytime a payment triggers an invoice, then that invoice goes to the credit of the individual players that have been made payments to. So we consider that a tax invoice. And if such a person does not have any other source of income, then that is sufficient compliance to us, and therefore they don't need to onboard Etims. So what we are really saying is that you don't need to onboard for purposes of just onboarding, But what we're asking is we need to have access and transmission of your transaction information. So if it's going to come from a common system that is giving us transaction data for various a number of players, then that is acceptable to us. The second solution that is very similar to that, remember the solutions we talked about, the simplified solutions, the USSD, and we have the eCitizen, the web solution on eCitizen. Now, a person who is a seller, that is like if I'm the seller, then I would like to nominate someone who I'm selling to, the buyer, to be generating invoices for me. So let me just give an example. You could be having a regular client yourselves. I don't know in what circumstances this applies, but I'm just going to try. But if you have a regular client who every month for every month you give them a fee note, so that they pay, it's the other way around. You're actually paying them for something, and then that person says, you know what, I don't want to be doing this myself. Maybe the service providers, maybe that's a better example. If you have someone who normally does your security, for example, or you have the persons who provide cleaning services, and they say, I don't want to be involved with the invoicing for this, then they can go to any of these platforms, USSD or eCitizen, and nominate you as the person who will be making the invoices on their behalf. So in that case, every month when you are supposed, the payment is due for you to make the payment to them, then you also generate the invoice on their behalf, and they have nominated you in this system. Now I'm going to tell you that the first system, reverse invoicing solution, it's active, and we are having these engagements with our taxpayers for purposes of them beginning the integration process. But then for the second solution, it's one that is due probably by mid-May for us to have that second solution in place for use by yourselves. But it's good to talk about it so that once it comes into play, then you know what you're supposed to do. Lastly, the basis for exemption is that in case uh, any transactional system is not covered in any of the first two, A or B, a system that is recognized maybe is being used, because I gave you the one for the coffee, and that one is actually under a regulatory body, the Capital Market Authority. But we'll have someone who will have an independent system that is a trusted system that is covering a lot of transactions downstream. Then these have not been excluded from this consideration, and can be, once someone makes an application and brings this to our attention, can be a consideration for an integration to be done with this system. Next slide. It was important for me to spend some time on that because it's coming up a lot. But then now I may not be able to cover everything for the purposes of today's session, because we'd like to give enough time also for you to air your maybe your Q&A and maybe your comments. So I'd invite you to visit our website, www.kra.go.ke, so that you can be able to get more information about what we've learned today and more. But you also need to look at the provisions in the Tax Procedures Act and the TPA Electronic Tax Invoice Regulations 2024, so that for anywhere where I might have missed or you might want more information, you can get this information from these sources. The next slide, really, we're just giving you details of our contacts. You can go to the next slide. So this is the main office. Can go back to the previous slide, sorry. It's the main office that is taking care of Etims, but then I have mentioned that the Mombasa office is sufficiently equipped for supporting you, but I'm sure maybe Felix will be able to share the contact details, the extensions within which someone can call if they need direct support from the Mombasa office. So with that, I come to the end of this presentation, also thanking you for being with me thus far, and maybe taking it over to the moderators for the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Before I hand over to Ms. Julu to take over the Q&A session, maybe just a brief introduction of Ms. Hakamba Harusi Wangwe. She's the Chief Manager, KRA Domestic Tax Department. Thank you so much. Your presentation was great. She has a strong background in tax administration and project management for 22 years. And for over the 22 years, she's been working at KRA. In line with KRA's mandate for offering efficient tax services and technology initiatives, she has made key contributions towards development of several key automation initiatives in domestic tax department, normally iTax, tax invoice management, and digital service tax. In 2011, she joined iTax project team, where she led the implementation of some key automation reforms through the online platform. She has successfully spearheaded the rollout of the electronic tax invoicing for VAT, registered taxpayers, and currently transitioning some taxpayers to taxpayers not registered for VAT. So I believe from the presentation she's made, you can see she has great experience, and she actually, we have a lot to learn from her. Yes, and now I'll hand over to Ms. Julu to take us through the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Sharon. I think from what you just read out, we're in good hands. And I'm also sure that the question and answer session will be also very informed. Just to go straight to it, there are a couple of guys who have sent us questions on the chat section. So perhaps you can start with that, but we encourage perhaps if you can just raise your hand so that you can ask a question. If it's lengthy or if you just, you're not in a position to type, just raise your hand and we'll get you so that you ask the question personally. But to ask the first question to Ms. Hakamba, someone is asking if your entity is not VATable, that is having a turnover of below 5 million. Is it a requirement to register to the Etims, considering registration for VAT is voluntary with an option of the registration? So there's that aspect that touches on VAT. And then, Ms. Kiriti, I'll just take the question 3 at a time so that they're answered, and then we go to the next one so that we don't overcrowd the answers. The next one will be, Ms. Kiriti is asking, are we the ones to write the commitment letters, or is there a standard form? And then the third question will be, if there's a transfer of logbook, who is supposed to process the same on Etims? Is it the purchaser or the vendor? So we can start with those 3 questions, and then once they're answered, then we'll go to the next one. Ms. Hakamba?
Yes, thank you. So for the first question, the registration on Etims is not limited to VAT registered taxpayers, because as we said, we are now transitioning to non-VAT registered taxpayers. And for this one, we don't have a threshold. So for VAT registration, there is a threshold of 5 million, but then there's no threshold for onboarding on Etims right now. So all taxpayers with business income are required to onboard. The commitment form is available. If you go to the KRA website, it's available on the KRA website. However, you are the one to fill it in. So it's a standard form, but then you fill it in and submit it when you are doing the service request. And then the issue of teams, this is not about NTSA and logbooks. So NTSA, the issue of logbooks and anything to do with motor vehicle management, it's under the NTSA services. So Teams and Etims really is, for us, we are talking about tax invoice management system, and therefore there's no relation between the two. It's 2 different implementations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hakamba. I think we are confusing between the Etims that is under NTSA and the Etims that we have now. So perhaps one of you could just decide to just change the name of their Etims. And I'm sure we will not be the only people having these problems. But anyway, the next question is, how should a taxpayer with a rental income obligation use the Etims? That is the next question. And then the other question is, when processing an ETR receipt, does the software automatically detect the client's PIN number? And then the other question will be, if one has office branches in different cities, does that person open different accounts on Etims, or is one just sufficient for those branches? So we can start by answering those ones.
Hakamba, if it's okay, I can also assist with the Q&A.
Very well, Miss Washuka. I'm very sorry. I see you. If you can assist, the better.
All right.
Okay.
So I think the first question was on the taxpayers with rental income. So for those who are maybe under the monthly rental income where you are providing housing for residential, you'd have residential units, or if you have commercial units, the difference between the two is for residential, you're leasing property to, tenants, people living with their families. Well, for commercial, it's a business that has rented your property. So in that case, you charge VAT on the rent. So for both cases, you would be required to do your invoicing through the system. That is through either Etims or Teams if you're using the ETR device for the commercial rent. So for a taxpayer who is not registered for VAT but has residential units, then you would onboard on either of the solutions you have available. And if rent is your only business income, then, or if you're a lawyer and you also have some rental units, residential that is, then you would onboard on either the online portal or the simplified solutions that we have available under the Etims Lite. So you can invoice through eCitizen, your eCitizen profile, or even go as far as using the USSD option. So whichever is at your convenience. So the next question is, a question we keep getting is, so I have to issue an invoice to all of my tenants. Let's say a number of them. Sorry, I think we have some noise from Lawrence. Okay. So regardless of how many tenants you have, because we would expect that for each tenant, you have a lease agreement with them. You're receiving payments from each tenant individually. You're able to keep track of your tenants individually. So we would expect that the invoicing you also do to each of the tenants individually. So the other question is, when processing an ETR receipt, does the software automatically detect the client's PIN number? No, it doesn't, because at the time of the client making the purchase, it is actually the client's responsibility to inform. Now, in the case of someone coming to get, services from one of you, wanting to be represented by a lawyer, depending on whether they are coming to you in their personal right, or, for a business, as a business. So if they are coming to get legal services for purposes of them going about their business, then, and if they are registered for VAT, they would require to issue you with their PIN, so that when the invoice or the receipt you issue them comes out, it comes capturing their PIN, and they will be able to use that as a basis to claim that legal service as an expense. But if it's if it's to an end consumer, like if I came to you personally wanting one of you lawyers to represent me on a personal matter, that I do not need to issue with my PIN, because now that is for my own, for my own purpose. So the capture of the client's PIN is triggered by the client themselves. The one making the purchase or the one procuring the services would need to inform you that they would want their PIN captured on the receipt or invoice for them to be able to declare that that service they are getting from you as an expense. The other question is on whether if one has branches, for example, in different cities. So do you need to open different accounts on Etims, or is one sufficient? So if it's one business entity that has multiple branches across the country in different cities, or even within the same city, but you're in different locations, as long as the same PIN is what is being used by all of these branches, then you just use that one Etims registration, meaning that for each of the locations or branches, the company PIN is what will be used. However, for you to be able to utilize the system at each branch, again, depending on what kind of, business you're in, the nature of your transactions. So like the solutions Hakamba has taken us through for the online, if it's a law firm with different branches across the country, then the online portal or whichever solution you'll onboard, because it's for services, so the online portal or the eCitizen profile, you can access it from whichever web browser. However, if you're selling goods, then it would mean you would use either one of the downloadable softwares we have available, meaning that you download it on a device that you'd use a separate installation for each branch on a device. That is the free solution KRA is providing. The other option, of course, is if you already have an existing billing system, you can have it integrated and be able to access that system across any of the branches. So that is provided for in the system, that the Etims solution, the various Etims solutions can be accessed by the same entity with multiple branches across the country. Just depends on what solution you will onboard on. Thank you, Julu.
Thank you to Ms. Washuka. Then we go to the next question on the issue of withholding tax. What about withholding tax to foreigners where a resident is responsible for deducting withholding tax? Ms. Hakamba touched on that earlier on, but I'm sure she can clarify. And then one of us is asking, does this system apply to persons filing nil returns? And then the next question would be, if it's possible for us to have a demo on the use of the software. So I see Ms. Hakamba has already answered that the Mombasa office can facilitate the demo. So I think that will be sufficient enough as an answer. But then Ms. Anita Shah is asking, how long does it take to get approval? She is transiting from KRA Citizen to Etims as she recently got registered for VAT. She has submitted the commitment form and ID, but is still waiting for approval for 3 weeks. So there's the time frame that this process requires. And then the last one, is it feasible for small scale businesses, Mama Mbogas, to use Etims? What is KRA's experience on this since the rollout? Which I think it's important because in our daily lives, we also interact with, ordinary Kenyans, and we also need to explain this to them. Perhaps they will not be understanding. So it's an important question that Ms. Washuka, perhaps you can answer it.
I can take these ones.
Okay,
Sorry.
okay, Ms. Hakamba. Okay, very well.
So I'll take the issue about withholding tax to non-residents. Remember, the person who is conducting business is the resident or you're making payments. You're making payments to a non-resident, therefore you are withholding. We talked about non-residents with no permanent establishment. Any services that you receive from this, we have said that they are exempt. Sorry, I was almost confusing it. So they're exempt. So services received from a non-resident, and remember we have also said for imports, even goods, when you're importing something, the transaction data is actually being captured by our customs department, and therefore that's why it is also exempt. So that is covered. Filing nil returns. What you're looking at, you're filing nil returns, and then when you're filing nil returns, remember when you're filing your return, especially a nil return, it actually tells you to confirm that you did not have business transactions in that month. So by you issuing invoices means that there were business transactions, and therefore there's no reason why you are filing a nil return. The issue is transactions. Did you have transactions? Then generate an electronic tax invoice. The second bit would be, did you have transactions? Then you have no reason to file a nil return. There are two things that I'd like maybe to invite my colleague Felix as I move. The issue of the demo of the software and how long it takes to take approval, perhaps for my colleague Felix to pick up. But then I'll go to the last one. If it is feasible for small businesses to use Etims, what our experience has been. Our focus has really been in the last 3 months on taxpayers who are facing off with the persons who are conducting business. For example, if you are making a supply to a restaurant or a hotel, in your case, maybe in the hotels, then in that case, if you're making a supply to a business entity, then we have been interested in that. Not that it does not apply to the persons in the market who are mainly making sales to people who are end consumers. Not that we are not interested, but we are trying to take small bites. So yes, it has been feasible in that regard because some of these big supermarkets have been able to onboard most of their suppliers onto the platform for purposes of them having their expenditure supported with an electronic tax invoice. The reason why we have the simplified solutions is such that even if you have a very small supplier and you need that electronic tax invoice, that person can take 2 minutes to be able to generate it for you and make sure that you are covered. So for those facing off with business entities, enterprises, mostly it's where we are focusing on, but it doesn't mean that the others that are just making supplies to end consumers, we've been talking about the salons, you've seen our publicity material, salons, garages. It doesn't mean that they're not important. It's just that our focus has been on B2B transactions, but then everyone is supposed to onboard, and it is feasible to that effect. Probably maybe when we start taking over with enforcement initiatives, we'll be able to see how apparent that is. So I think I'd like to welcome Felix for the two, how we are going to go about those two issues. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Kamba. Now, before I tackle that, I think most taxpayers, maybe some of them, they confuse between the teams. You know, we have tax invoice management system. This one refers to the ETRs that Madam Kamba talked about, the ETRs that are configured for generation of invoices. Then the National Transport and Safety Authority has also its system. It's known as Transport Information Management System. It's a coincidence that the abbreviations are similar, but they are different systems. Also, the NTSA does not have Etims. It's only KRA that has Etims and Etims. Then I move to the next to the question regarding approval. This question that reads, how long does it take to get approval? I'm transiting from KRA e-citizen to Etims, as I recently got registered for VAT. Now, from KRA e-citizen, it is the simplified solution. It's the EPOS. The simplified solution, EPOS and the USSD code, they do not support VAT. If you are not VAT registered, you cannot onboard them. You cannot be able to transact. Therefore, in this case, we're changing from e-citizen to e-teams. Everything is e-teams. But if we are changing from one solution to another, we are changing from the simplified solution, it's e-citizen, to another solution which supports VAT operation like online or e-client. What you need to do, you just write a request, a letter, then you bring to our office, it will be processed. Then from my position, I will be able to transfer you from the e-citizen solution to a solution like which suits you, the online solution. And we'll also be able to make sure that the online solution reflects all the rates of VAT through data migration or data fixing. So the approval takes just immediately after you have done the uploading of the ID and the duly filled commitment form. The approval is immediate. The approvers are here in the southern region. We have all the stations in the southern region have approvers. We have Mombasa North, Mombasa South, Malindi, you have Boy, all the approvers are there. So if you visit any station, you should be able to be facilitated with approval. It doesn't take much time. So please visit the station that is near you for facilitation, or you can reach me. My extension, my landline is, you can take it. I will post it here for you to be able to contact me for any inquiry. I think there is no any panic regarding those two questions I've tackled. Everything is new.
Excuse me, Miss Julia, if I may, I think I have
Yes,
a
yes.
question.
Yes.
Yes, now I'd just like to get a clarification.
Yes.
Now, does this mean that this system is the e-team system is voluntary, or is it non-voluntary? Considering with respect to professional service providers, we're looking at someone who maybe has a turnover of 250,000 per year and basically has not generated any tax invoices, because I'm looking at this person maybe was doing what was getting income of around 20 to 22,000 shillings per month, which I believe is not taxable in such situations. So does this mean, and also looking at small scale business like Mama Mboga, does this mean that this system is voluntary to some point?
It's not voluntary. It's for every people in business, people doing business, for everybody doing business. And there is, as both said, there is no threshold. There's no the 5 million threshold. Everybody transact, everybody in business, but there are those exemptions provided. The exemption, if you, for example, the 20,000 is for employment. All the monuments, they are exempted. The people that are receiving those payments, if you are employed, you are exempted from onboarding Etims.
Thank you, Mr.
And
Samani.
then maybe I can add. I can
Yes,
add to
yes,
that
yes.
because I think there's a bit of a confusion. I think you've mentioned something about if someone is earning 22,000 a month. If you have, I need us to separate the two. The transaction recording of your transactions through the Etims and also the filing of returns. So as you continue recording your transaction through Etims, whether you are below the tax net or not, it will become apparent. It will actually come out very clearly, because when you're filing your return, for example, and your transmissions to KRA are about 280,000 for the whole year. What will happen when you're filing your return and declaring your 280,000 of transaction details, maybe sales, then when you do the relief, you'll see that there's no tax to pay. So we need to separate the two, so that when you're making your transmissions, just know that your tax liability or your obligation still stands on another side, that whether or not you are supposed to pay how much tax at the end of the year, we are not limited to those who have employment income, but we are actually focusing on those who have earned any income, for them to file their returns by end of June. So the returns that we're filing by end of June is not limited for those who have employment income. Even when you have business income, and what supports whether or not you have tax to pay is actually your transaction details, your turnover declarations, and this will be able to see from the details of transmitted invoices. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hakamba. Perhaps to just pick up on, I can't remember whether it was Ms. Washuka or yourself who said it, about your enforcement initiatives. Now, my question is, the regulations require that this system be inspected regularly by officers from, I think, KRA. Does this mean that this inspection will be done regularly at a appointed time? Will you be informed prior? Because perhaps we could be having our laptops that have these Etims and we're out of the office. The truth is, some of us even have, mobile law firms. So this inspection of this system, will it be done by yourselves, or is it officers that require enforcement on a regular basis? Is it biannually? Is it quarterly? Can you just explain? Because I know the regulations require that. And then perhaps on the issue of maintenance of this system, for us law firms, is it, since you say it's a software, is this something that is just updated by KRA? When the software is updated from your end, it is updated countrywide for the rest of us, or would it be requiring us updating this software or re-downloading it or something like that? That would be my question. Perhaps you could start with that.
Okay, so for inspection, yes, what we want to make sure of is that when it comes to transmission of transaction data, and this is not just limited to Etims, that you have maintained the system in the manner within which it was installed on your device. And the issue about inspection, and I'm going to tie it with the maintenance bit of it, is that over time there might be updates that will be pushing through the system, and you'll be getting the prompts to update your software so that it's in the latest working form. Sometimes when you miss out on some of the benefits of the system, for example, you find that you're stuck with a problem that we since sorted out in January, it is because you have not updated your software. So for maintenance, we'll be requiring that whenever you get the prompt, you make sure that you adopt the software, the latest software, so that you're able to transact in a manner that is actually acceptable. The reason for this is also that as we come to this budget cycle, maybe by June, you'll find that there'll be movement of categorization of items, something that was zero rated moves to 16% or vice versa. And we will be doing a software update, and we'll be requiring that you make the update accordingly. Now you'll find some, like for example, the ones who had to make an adjustment for gas, it was 8%, now it's at 16%, but we have some who are still transacting on gas at 8%. It means we are losing revenue. So when it comes to inspection, it means any authorized officer can actually inspect your software to make sure that it's working in a manner that it's not compromising the revenue that we are actually trying to collect, and also making sure that all invoices that are being generated are being transmitted, because we also have incidences where some are generating invoices but are not transmitting them to the revenue authority. So it doesn't matter if it's our enforcement teams, our compliance teams could actually check your software to make sure that it's working in the manner it was designed. Thank you.
Very well. Thank you, Ms. Hakaba. I'm done with the online questions. Perhaps if anybody has any other question, they could raise their hand so that they ask the team. Anything to be clarified, any suggestion, any concern?
Yeah, yes, Ms. Julie, I can see there is Dan who has raised his hand up.
Well, I just want a clarification.
Yes.
What happens in instances where I raise an invoice, but the client fails to pay, yet that is captured in the KRA system? Does KRA count that as on their part? Do they record that I've made some money following that transaction, or what happens? Because there are cases where you raise that invoice for some amount, then the client maybe for some reason does not pay, yet it's captured. When you generate the invoice, automatically KRA sees that this money has been made. So what happens in such a case when at the end of the day you are filing your returns? How do we reconcile that?
Okay, so for that one, through the system, we first of all, again, let's separate payment and raising of invoices. So what we want to do is confirm that we have a transaction that has been made. And sometimes why we want to separate this is that sometimes you have your own payment terms, that you complete a transaction, but you tell that person, no problem, you can pay me within 90 days. That doesn't mean that you don't have to account for the tax for that transaction until such a time when that person pays you. So in the event that you actually do account for that transaction and that person absolutely fails to pay you, we have the provision for raising or reversing partially or fully a transaction through the provision of the credit note. You can raise a credit note so that you negate, and it creates an audit trail in our system to show that it's a transaction that actually did not come to fruition. Uh, in the event that completely that over time this remains outstanding, because for VAT purposes, you know that there's a limitation of how long it can take you for you to raise a credit note, up to 6 months. So in the event that you are working outside this process and someone absolutely fails to pay, then again in the law you have provision for making adjustments for bad debt, and you're able to make adjustments accordingly in that regard, in line with the law. Thank you.
Very well. Thank you, Ms. Hakamba. Anybody else with a question? Yes, anybody else with any question? Perhaps you can raise your hand or type it on the chat section for the team to finalize with. But I see Mr. Samani is handling some of the chat questions. I think this conversation is recorded. Yes, Sharon, it's recorded, right? And we'll be able to share with everybody else who was not in attendance today. There being no any other question, I think it's safe to say that we have exhausted our Q&As. So perhaps I will just hand over to our chair, Ms. Natasha Ali, to just thank the team for a fantastic job done and perhaps close the session for us.
Thank you, Ms. Julu. Good afternoon, members. I hope you're all well. I do not want to take much of your time, but I just want to thank the KRA team for actually accepting our invitation to come forward and actually try and demystify whatever issues we were having in terms of coming on board. I think they have answered all the questions. Should we have any other queries, we can always reach out to them once again. We did have a discussion and we had agreed we'll be having more engagements over the course of the year. If we have any particular topics that we wish to address, please feel free to send the same to council and we'll make sure that the KRA team is informed of the same and they come provide us with the presentations. Just to confirm, I would like to thank Mr. Julius Kiptun, as well as Madam Hakamba Wangwe, and Mr. Felix Samani, as well as Madam Washukwa Caroline. Thank you so much for taking the time and actually presenting doing the presentation for the members. We are definitely looking forward to more fruitful engagements with yourselves. I'm sure our members have learned a lot. I know I have learned from all that presentation. At the same time, I'd love to thank Ms. Julu and Ms. Maiga for taking the time to put together this particular training, and the entire council, who I know have put in their input to make sure that this training was a success. I know the training is meant to be on issues of coming on board, but now that I have your attention, please let's remember that tomorrow at 2 p.m. we'll be having a meeting at High Court number 3, that's Honorable Ngijo's Court, to discuss the issue of the draft, the Workers' Injury Compensation Bill 2024, as well as the draft, the Occupational Safety and Health Bill 2024. With that, thank you once again, members and the KRA team, and I wish you a good afternoon. Thank you. Back to you, Maiga and Ms. Julie.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I believe with that, at this point, I have nothing much to add. And unless Ms. Julu would like to say anything before we close.
No, I have nothing else to add. I think Chair has closed the meeting for us. We thank all of you for attending this session. And it is safe to say that the session is now concluded. You can leave at your own pleasure. Thank you and have a good afternoon.
Thank you. And keep an eye for the training.
Yes.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.